All right, so today we're going to connect the dots between four stories that honestly seem like they're from different worlds. We're talking about a mission to the sun, a major geopolitical power play, the rise of some incredible new materials, and a huge challenge in skilling up a massive workforce. But stick with me, because when you put them all together, they paint this amazing picture of modern India at a really pivotal moment. Let's dive in.
And this really brings us to the core question of this whole explainer. How does a nation like India juggle these massive, soaring ambitions in space, while at the same time dealing with some really fundamental challenges right here on the ground? It's a balancing act, and it pretty much defines a nation's journey.
And believe me, those ambitions don't get much higher than this. So let's start our journey by looking up, way, way up, at India's quest to understand our closest star.
So, say hello to Aditya L1. Now, this isn't just another satellite. This is India's first ever dedicated solar observatory. Its whole job is to just stare at the sun 24/7, completely uninterrupted, and collect data that we've just never been able to get before.
And to get that kind of continuous view, it had to go on an incredible journey. We're talking 1.5 million kilometers from Earth. It's headed to a really special spot in space called Lagrange Point 1, or L1 for short, where the gravity of the Earth and the Sun basically cancel each other out. It's the absolute perfect parking spot for a sun-gazing satellite.
So you might be asking, why go through all that trouble? Well, the payoff is just huge. This mission is absolutely crucial for predicting space weather. Those big solar flares that can mess with our satellites and even knock out power grids. It also seriously beefs up India's scientific muscle and helps us squeeze every last drop of insight from all that solar data.
And here's a part that I think is just fantastic. The way they're handling the data. ISRO, the Indian Space Research Organization, isn't just hoarding this information. Nope. It's already made over 23 terabytes of it public, basically sending out an open invitation to the entire Indian scientific community to jump in and help unlock the sun's biggest secrets.
Okay, so now let's bring it back down to Earth. We're going to pivot from the, relatively orderly cosmos to the much, much messier order of things down here, where the rules of the game seem to be changing right under our feet.
So to really get what's happening today, we need a super quick history lesson. Way back in 1823, the US issued something called the Monroe Doctrine, which pretty much told European powers, hey, stay out of the Americas. But over the years, it kind of morphed into a justification for US influence over Latin America, and you can still hear the echoes of that thinking in geopolitics today.
Now, let's look at a modern example that our source material points to: US actions in Venezuela. Officially, the justification you'll often hear is the war on drugs, but the source alleges that there are other motives going on behind the scenes, things like reasserting dominance in the region, pushing back against rivals like China and Russia, and of course, getting access to Venezuela's massive oil reserves. We're talking something like 17% of the world's total.
And all of this leads to a really important point, which is summed up perfectly by this quote from our source. The argument is that what we're seeing is a global shift, a move away from a rules-based order to a power-based order, one where raw strength and influence matter more than international law. And this is the complicated, messy world that India has to find its way through.
And, navigating a world based on power means a country has to be strong and resilient from the inside out. Which brings us to our third story, India's really smart strategic pivot toward building the actual materials of the future.
The key word to know here is biomaterials. And it's pretty simple, really. These are just alternatives to things like plastic that are made from fossil fuels. Instead, biomaterials come from biological stuff. Think plants, algae, even organic waste. They are absolutely essential if we're serious about building a sustainable green economy.
And they come in a few different types. First, you've got your drop-in materials, which are basically direct bio-friendly replacements for existing plastics. Then you have drop-out materials, which are totally new substances like PLA. And then you get the really cool futuristic stuff, novel materials, like polymers that can heal themselves or bioimplants for medicine.
Now, this isn't just some science fair project. This is a huge economic opportunity. As of 2024, the market for just bioplastics in India is already worth around $500 million. And honestly, it's just getting started. It's set for some major growth.
And for India, pushing for biomaterials just makes so much sense. It really ticks all the boxes. It helps meet climate goals, it cuts down on the need for expensive imported oil, it creates new ways for farmers to make money by growing the raw materials, and it makes Indian products more competitive on the world stage. It's a win-win-win.
Okay, so you've got a space program, a smart foreign policy, a green economy, but all of these incredible ambitions depend on one single thing: people. And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important piece of this whole puzzle.
So India has put a massive effort into training its workforce. I mean, look at the flagship PMKVY skilling program. It has trained an incredible number of people, 1.4 crore, which is 14 million individuals. That's a huge number.
But, and this is a big but, here's the twist. Despite that massive number, the reality on the ground is pretty stark. If you look, only about 4.1% of India's entire workforce has actually had formal vocational training. Now, just for comparison, the average for developed countries is well over 50%. So yeah, that gap is enormous.
So what's the deal? Well, the source material points to a really deep structural problem. A lot of these skilling programs are kind of operating in their own little bubble, totally separate from the main college and university system. And that lack of integration, that's the core challenge that's holding things back.
All right, so now it's time. Let's pull all of these different threads together. A solar mission, shifting global power, green materials, and a skills gap. How on earth do all these things connect?
Well, this has been the journey, right? We've seen India literally reaching for the sun with Aditya L1, a huge symbol of its high-tech ambition. But at the exact same time, it has to navigate this messy, power-based world that demands self-reliance. To be self-reliant, it has to build a new, sustainable economy from the ground up. And the foundation for all of that, the real engine, is its people.
And that really brings us to our final lingering question. A nation's biggest, boldest projects, whether they're in outer space or on the world stage, are ultimately powered by its people. So you have to ask, can a nation truly reach for the stars if its feet aren't planted firmly on the ground of a skilled, empowered, and ready population?